Does Egypt support Donald Trump's decision on Jerusalem? Leaks suggest leaders in Cairo don't object to US recognition of the city as Israel's capital. And Saudi Arabia stands accused of secret support. What does the apparent shift mean for the future of Jerusalem? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. After US President Donald Trump recognised Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the condemnation from the Arab world was swift and strong. But is everyone on board? The New York Times reports that Egyptian media has been pressured to play down opposition to Trump's decision. In leaked phone recordings, a senior intelligence officer reportedly told leading TV talk show hosts to influence their viewers to back the decision, contrary to widespread condemnation amongst Muslims. The newspaper quoted intelligence officer Captain Ashraf Al Kholi asking hosts, how is Jerusalem different from Ramallah, which is the base of the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank? Captain Al Kholi was quoted telling the talk show hosts an intifada would not serve Egypt's national security interests and could revive Hamas. Well, Egypt has denied these claims, but it's not the only one accused. Saudi Arabia is also being criticised for what's seen as a weak reaction to Trump's policy change. Even as King Salman publicly denounced Trump, the heir to the throne, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was reportedly urging Palestinian leaders to accept the change. Meanwhile, the Arab League appears to be increasing its support for a Palestinian state. Jordan hosted a meeting on Saturday. Egypt, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and the Palestinians were all in Amman. Jordan's Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi said the group would push the United Nations to formally recognise a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The UN already considers East Jerusalem an occupied territory illegally annexed by Israel in 1967. Well, let's go now to our guests. And joining us from London via Skype, Sami Hamdi, editor of International Interest. In Ramallah, Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary-General of the Palestinian National Initiative. He's also a former Minister of Information. And in Weybridge via Skype, Nikolai Duer-Gunderson, a Middle East specialist at Kingston University, London. A very warm welcome to all of you. Mustafa, first of all, if you will, your response to this New York Times report on Egypt. Are you surprised by what are pretty shocking revelations?
I am not sure how serious this report is or how accurate it is, because it is building the whole story on information leaking from one officer, which contradicts the official positions that were declared by Egypt. We know that the Israeli side and so many other parties are trying to put Palestinians in confrontation with not only the United States, but also with many Arab countries, and we will not allow that to happen. But that does not mean we should not be very clear about our position. Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine. Anybody who dares to touch the rights of the Palestinian people in Jerusalem, or the rights of Muslims and Arabs in Jerusalem, or Christians as well, will be perceived as a traitor to the rights of people and to the history of this place.
Okay.
And I do not buy much of what was said, because I think it is exaggerated and it's only on one point. But one thing should be clear. We want much stronger, much harder and much clearer positions to confront what President Trump has done, which
is absolutely. We're going to get on to the Arab response as a whole a little bit later. Let me just put to you first of all, you're sceptical about this report, but you must accept that the New York Times is a very reputable newspaper, and David Kirkpatrick is a very respected journalist. They wouldn't be putting something out that wasn't true.
No, they might be sure about the leak that they got, but that leak doesn't mean much. It's about one person, one captain who claims to be in intelligence service. This is not the official position. That's what I'm saying.
But that's the point, isn't it? That it varies from the official position.
Yes, we want more. We want, let me be frank with you, what we want from all Arab and Muslim countries is two things. First of all, to boycott Israel, to take away their embassies from Israel, to disconnect all diplomatic relationships with Israel if they exist, and to participate in the campaign for boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel, to restrain its policies against towards Jerusalem and in terms of occupation and the system of apartheid. We know that we cannot ask Arab armies to come and fight Israel, but at least there has to be a complete boycott that would help us in our struggle to achieve freedom.
Okay. Sami, I mean, this newspaper article suggests that Egypt is very far from a complete boycott and what Mustafa is asking in relation to support from the Palestinians, that publicly they may be saying one thing, but behind closed doors saying something totally different.
I think I respect the diplomatic tone of the honourable guest from Ramallah, and I feel like he has to adopt such a diplomatic tone. I feel that actions speak louder than words, and I don't think this article really brings anything that we didn't know. Let's take, for example, that under the Mubarak regime, Mubarak at least reportedly ignored the tunnels by which the smuggling networks were taking place, but closed the Rafah border. Sisi, on the other hand, is closing the Rafah border and smashing the tunnels, causing such a blockade on Gaza that he's forcing the Gazan people, forcing Hamas to have no option but to go to war with Israel. With regards to the Egyptian army, I think the attitude is very clear. We fought Israel once, we did our duty, we lost. Arabs shouldn't expect us to go to war again. I think this shameless attitude from the Egyptians, I honestly, this is a very shameless, very dark attitude from the Egyptians, whereby they genuinely believe that the Palestinian cause is no longer worth fighting for. In other words, Sisi and the Egyptian army are so desperate to keep their position that they want to keep the US and Washington appeased at all costs.
Okay, Sami, let me just jump in there a moment, because it's not just the Egyptians who are saying this, if indeed we do believe this article to be true. The Saudis are also saying it, and indeed we've had a tweet from the Bahraini foreign minister on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly meeting saying, let's not get into an argument with the US over a side issue. They're relegating the Palestinian issue to a side issue.
Because your original question was asking me about Egypt, but with regards to Saudi Arabia, it's the same thing. With Mohammed bin Salman, his pursuit, his thirst, his quest to become king is such that he knows he needs the US. Now, he's not king yet, and he wants to be king. He's thinking, why on earth would I want to upset my ally over the US, who I need to become king, over Israel? Plus, also, I think with regards to the Saudis in particular, they're a bit tired of the whole Palestine-Israel issue, because the main fighting force in Palestine is Hamas, who are considered a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudis believe that if we make the Palestinian cause our number one cause, we are handing a golden plate to the Muslim Brotherhood. This very narrow-minded politics from the Saudis, this very narrow-minded politics from Egypt, and the proof of the Saudi stance is that Bahrain, which is considered Saudi's proxy state, and often when we get a statement from Bahrain, it's usually what the Saudis don't want to say publicly, that proves that the Saudis are moving away from the Palestine-Israel issue because of their own, to be honest, I can't find any other word for it, selfish interests. In other words, they believe Iran is a greater threat. They believe the Muslim Brotherhood is a greater threat. Mohammed bin Salman believes Walid bin Talal is a greater threat. In other words, everybody is a greater threat than Israel. Plus, also, it shows a very lack of empathy with the Palestinian cause. For Egypt, for Saudi Arabia, for the Arab nations, the Palestinians just aren't worth it. In other words, they're not willing to go all out now to make their brothers in Palestine succeed in their very, I'll be brutally honest, a noble cause. We have an occupying state that took over land forcefully and is kicking people out of their rightful homes. And instead of the Arab states standing up for their brothers, standing up and saying, we are going to reject it, instead, they're going to Washington saying, please, please put me in a position of power.
Okay.
Please, please let me stay in power.
Let's bring in Nikolai here. Do you believe with what Sami is saying that the Palestinian issue amongst the Arabs in the Arab region has become a side issue?
Well, I agree with much of what was just said, that right now, I think we're seeing certain governments in the Middle East courting Trump and being courted by Trump, and it is about survival. We should remember that the Middle East of today is not the same as the Middle East of 30, 40 years ago. I think that many governments in the Middle East are facing more immediate challenges in their mind, and it's about staying in power. So they care about, for example, what will happen with Iran, what will happen with the blockade, what about the protests, for example, that we call the Arab Spring. So I think that there is much truth in what your guest has just said. I think that support from Trump is also another factor. There are some who argue that Trump, for example, influenced MBS or Mohammed bin Salman's position as crown prince. There are some who argue that he also gave a green light to the current blockade. So it would appear that some strongmen, if you like, including in Egypt, they want to get into his good books, and they will care more about that and their survival than they will about Palestine, which is quite sad to see because of Egypt's symbolic importance as a hub of Arab nationalism in the past. And, that is now kind of going downhill.
Mustafa Barghouti, I mean, what you've just been hearing there, two guests who are very adamant that there is a shift away from interest in the Palestinian cause to more selfish nationalist interests. Where does that leave the Palestinians?
No, I don't think that the Palestinian issue can be marginalized. They tried to marginalize it. We had maybe a couple of very difficult years because of the internal disputes in the Arab world and because of the internal fights that are taking place. But I think the Palestinian cause came back very strongly, and nobody can move it off the table. And maybe this is what the United States wishes for. We know that some countries are so dependent on American protection, and that affects their policies, but nothing will deviate us really as Palestinians, or nothing should deviate us from concentrating on our main enemy, which is Israel and the occupation and the system of apartheid.
Would you not have expected, Mustafa, more of a
saying
reaction?
That, I must say also.
Would you not have expected more of a reaction from Arab states? We've had some meetings, we've had some condemnation, but really there's been no action.
Absolutely, that's what I explained very clearly in my first answer. We don't want just statements. We are tired of statements. We have a whole library of statements and condemnations which don't affect Israel at all. What we need are actions, and we are also realistic enough to realize that we cannot ask them to fight Israel, but we can ask them definitely to boycott Israel. We can ask them to respond to the will of their own peoples, which have been out in the streets in millions sometimes against the Trump decision. One more thing, I think what many Arab governments don't realize sufficiently is that Israel is a threat not only to Palestinians. Actually, Israel is conspiring now against Egypt through the issue, through Ethiopia regarding the water of the Nile. Israel is conspiring against Jordan, and if they are done with Palestine, they would want to take part of Jordan. It is very clear. I would even say they want to control the economy of the Gulf countries. So the sooner the Arab countries realize that this Israeli government is dangerous also for them, the better their behavior will be.
But Mustafa, many Arab countries are also seeing Israel as a potential partner in their new push against Iran.
That's a grave mistake. Against whom? They cannot think of this as we want to build an alliance with Israel against maybe Iran or other countries. The main threat in this region is Israel and the Zionist movement. The main threat is what Israel is trying to impose. And I think the sooner they can realize that, the better, because at the end of the day, they will discover that they would be harmed from such a relationship than they would benefit. And at the end of the day, I am saying, if you can't help the Palestinian people, please abstain from interfering. Let us continue our struggle, and we can continue our struggle, and we can manage to keep our question on the table, and we can keep the Palestinian struggle going on. So if you can't help us, please don't interfere.
Okay, Nikolai, how does the Palestinian struggle stay on the table here on in?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, your guest, for example, just mentioned Jordan as one country that's also seen reactions to Trump's decision. Jordan has a peace treaty with Israel, but at the same time, we have seen a lot of protests in Jordan shortly after this announcement was made. I have contacts in Jordan, and some of them are Palestinian, and one of my contacts discussed how there were many, many people who protested outside the American embassy, and they were saying to me, it is my right as a Palestinian. This is my homeland, and Trump has crossed the unspoken red line. Now, for Jordan, there's a balancing act here because, on the one hand, as I said, there's the treaty with Israel, but there's a lot of Palestinians in Jordan, Jordanians of Palestinian origin. So I think that we cannot say that the issue of Palestine will be marginalized. For some governments, perhaps they would say, well, we want to survive. But I think for the people, it is the pulse of the Arab street that ultimately matters. And that pulse can certainly strike back at any announcement that Trump decides is just going to happen. The Arab people do not want to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and I believe that this is an issue that could cause sufficient anger to threaten certain powers.
Yeah, Sami, how concerned should Arab leaders be of their people's reaction to any perceived sort of turning their back on the Palestinians, moving towards the US's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital?
If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, they should be really fearful of the Arab reaction. If you ask me today, the matter is very different. The fact of the matter is the Arab people are split with regards to priority. If you look at some Saudi accounts on Twitter, I even read some of them suggesting that there's nothing wrong with going to Israel for a holiday and to explore the artifacts of, King Solomon and the like. What really puzzles me is this. Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, despite all the carnage and oppression that he brought to Egypt, remains in Arab history as an idol because of his stance on Israel. King Faisal, although his domestic policies are disputed, he remains an idol in Arab history because of his stance on Israel. I would hazard a guess that if Sisi tomorrow, or Mohammed bin Salman, or King Abdullah of Jordan, or Bouteflika of Algeria, or any of these different countries said that we are firmly against Israel, we will not accept the Jerusalem as a capital, and they said it with belief, and they mobilized their nation's resources to making sure that Trump backs down on Jerusalem and letting Israel know that this is a red line, all of the Arab people would turn around and say, you know what, we can turn a blind eye to this oppression, and we can stand behind this leader on the matter of Israel and Palestine. And the proof of that is Erdogan from Turkey. Erdogan's popularity in the Arab world has soared because he is the only Arab leader who has only even Muslim leader who has come out and condemned Jerusalem's capital in a manner that can be described as defiant.
Okay, but Sami, we're not seeing that. We're not seeing King Salman or MBS doing that or Sisi doing that.
Exactly, and this is why I refer to it as a narrow-minded foreign policy. It's very tribal, it's very Bedouin, it's very my interest above everybody else. I want to be king. I want to be the powerful leader. It's nothing about my people, my community, my brothers in Palestine. A wrong injustice needs to be overturned with what the Israelis did to Palestinian people, with the fact that Israel is sitting on occupied land. Israel is sitting on land that belongs to Mohammed bin Salman's cousins, to his brothers, and he sits there instead of trying to make his brothers successful in Palestine.
Right.
He believes that the Muslim Brotherhood are a greater threat than Israel. So this narrow-minded foreign policy, far from being politically correct, will actually lead to very serious problems for Sisi and Mohammed bin Salman.
Okay.
Because let's be real, Israel does not genuinely believe that Mohammed bin Salman can ever be a true ally. Because when Mohammed bin Salman becomes king, we may see a very different king, a very different series of policies, one that doesn't necessarily require Washington
and that
support.
is a whole other inside story. So I'm just going to move on now to Mustafa. We know it's been widely reported, although not agreed or not accepted by Abbas, confirmed rather by Abbas, that Abbas visited Riyadh in November, just before the US's announcement. Officials close to the Palestinian leadership have told Al Jazeera, it's been widely reported again, that the Crown Prince urged the Palestinian leader, urged Abbas to forego the capital in East Jerusalem and accept a truncated deal. How much pressure is being put on Abbas?
No, this story is not true. Because I heard Mr. Abbas and he reported about his meeting and he never mentioned what you are saying. So I don't rely on rumors. I rely on official positions that we hear. But let me explain the essence of the issue today. The main issue is that the Arabs and maybe the Palestinian leadership, the PLO leadership, thought that Israel is ready for a compromise, for a solution that comes at the expense of many Palestinian rights, like giving us a state in only 22% of the land, while the UN decided we should get 44% and we deserve probably more. Yet they thought there will be a two-state solution and there will be a compromise and that will bring peace. That was the basis of Oslo Agreement and the Madrid Conference. And after that, the Arab Initiative.
But things have changed, haven't they? Things have moved on. We now have a new person in charge in the White House.
One moment,
someone who is willing to...
No,
I need to move on. We need to look forward rather than back here because we're running out of time.
That solution did not work. Israel does not want a compromise. Israel wants all of Palestine and maybe all of Jordan So it's time to see the reality and understand that we are not in a situation where we can have a solution with Israel or the Zionist movement. We have to struggle against their plans. We have to struggle against their occupation.
Nikolai,
and we have to change the balance of power with them through popular Palestinian resistance and through boycott, divestment,
which
sanctions.
is broadly accepted that Israel wants more than Palestine is willing to give. How much pressure is being put on Abbas by the US, first of all, now by Saudi, by Egypt, perhaps by other countries, to accept a deal where it doesn't get many of the things that it wanted, including East Jerusalem as its capital, including the right of return for many of its refugees?
Well, I think if we return to discussing Trump, for example, I think it's worth remembering that Trump is he's a businessman first and a politician second. And from his point of view, he is fulfilling pledges back home to have stronger ties with Israel. So he's prioritizing this. I also feel that he is trying to create a, if you like, a pact or a closer allegiance with Mohammed bin Salman and also with with al-Sisi in Egypt, and that he prioritizes reaching out to strongmen because he believes that this is how you combat terrorism. He's prioritizing that over the issue of Palestine. He's prioritizing his administration and sort of his business goals rather than a long-term interest in the Middle East that would also fall to the next president, because the problem with what he's doing is he's now shattering any reputation the U.S. may have to actually act as a peace broker, and I'm sure that the Palestinians would now be happy to talk to someone else about this.
So given this shift that has gone on, I mean, some say that Jerusalem as Israel's capital will become a reality. Just very briefly, do you think that's so?
I think that Trump believes it's going to become a reality. The Israelis certainly do, but I also see that there will be a lot of resistance. The one major act of protest I've seen in Jordan has been over Palestine. We're not talking about socioeconomic struggles here. We're talking about what is for the Palestinians a moral issue, an issue of homeland. And I think that sense of identity is strong enough that Trump should be careful.
Sami, we just have a minute left. Can we see all of this as perhaps just a small blip in what is a decades-old issue? If we see the end of Trump, do we see the situation revert to what it was before, or is it irrevocably changed?
I think, to be honest, my personal belief is that making Jerusalem the capital was the ambition of Clinton, of Obama, of Bush, of all the US presidents. I just think that the situation that Trump has inherited was not there at the time of these former presidents. They had to sit with the Palestinians and negotiate. The stance of the US presidents is a recognition of the Israeli state. The stance of the Arab states is the removal of the Israeli state and the restoration of the Palestinian lands where Jews and Muslims can live side by side together as they've done for centuries. This gulf in views on what the future should be means that this whole peace process is merely a political process by which to expand US interests, expand Israeli interests with regards into the region. I think now we're in an unprecedented situation with regards to the Middle East, where Israel is no longer the #1 enemy. I think we're in unprecedented territory whereby strongman leaders are terrified of their people. But there's also one thing that I want to say with regards to the fear that the people might rise up. I think Trump's call for Jerusalem as a capital was so well timed that all of the people's fervor, all of the people's anger was used up in the Arab Spring. Now people are tired. Now people have seen the bullets being shot at Ramallah al-Adawiyah and these other places. They've seen mass imprisonment, opponents being kicked out there. The fervor is gone. It was used up in the Arab Spring. This is why, in my opinion, and even though it hurts me and it breaks my heart to say it, politically, announcing Jerusalem as a capital was a masterstroke politically for the US and for Israel.
OK, Mustafa, I can see you shaking your head there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, though. We do have to finish our discussion there today. Many thanks to all of you for joining us. Sami Hamdi, Mustafa Barghouti and Nikolai Dua Gunderson. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here. Bye for now.